Welcome to the Directors UK podcast. We're the professional association for UK film and TV directors. No matter the format, no matter the genre, our featured directors share their approach to the craft. We hope you enjoy.
Tonight we have in conversation Robert Eggers with Sandra Hebron on Nosferatu.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here. And Robert, obviously thank you to you and thank you for the amazing film that people have just watched and I've had the pleasure of watching for a second time. It's quite well known, I think, that this is a long cherished project for you. You've been thinking about making this film, wanting to make this film for a long time. You've approached Nosferatu through different creative forms too. Could you share with us something about what it is in Nosferatu that really sparked your imagination, that has really resonated with you over a long period of time?
Yeah, so I saw the movie when I was like 9, and initially Max Schreck's performance is so mesmerizing, and the makeup design that was his design is very powerful, and I had that Bela Lugosi image in my head, and this was different, and then the film, of course, has an unparalleled haunting atmosphere, and I also really appreciated that Murnau and Gallian, the screenwriter, turned Stoker's story into a very simple fairy tale. I think like people talk about that it was sort of like a knockoff in order to not get caught. But I think many of the changes and most of the changes were to suit the filmmaker's collective taste, actually. So then when I was 17, my friend and I, we directed a play in high school that was a stage adaptation of Nosferatu. It was black and white on stage, black and white makeup, black and white sets and costumes. And then a guy who ran the Cool Theater in rural southern New Hampshire, who did Sam Shepard and the Duchess of Malfi instead of My Fair Lady, he saw it and invited us to do a more professional version of it, and at his theater. And this changed my life, and it cemented the fact that I wanted to be a director, and from that experience, Nosferatu is something that is like a big part of my being. Like as a creative person, it's kind of weird, but it is to feel like that, but it's the case.
And you acted in that stage performance too.
Yes. I was Orlok. But, whatever.
But time goes by and quite a lot of time has elapsed. Was it a project that was always kind of held in mind, but just not the right time to do it? Or what's been the
it was kind of weird how it came to kind of potentially be my film that I would make after my first feature, and I felt pretty gross about it. But I also had this opportunity. Thankfully, it didn't happen. Thankfully, it fell apart. And for many years, it was still something that I wanted to do, and then it fell apart the second time. And then I felt somebody's trying to tell me, "Don't make this." And you are struggling with your hubris, especially as a fairly inexperienced director, or you want to say very inexperienced director, to be taking on Nosferatu. It seems completely gross, despicable. But I kept going anyway. I don't know why. Just for my love of it, I guess. And then a movie fell apart that I thought I was going to make. And then I went to the head of Focus and said, "How about Nosferatu?" And here we are. But I'm really glad that I had more time because, I think it was the Northman was an incredible learning experience because I had the great fortune to make a movie that was way too big for my britches, and I had I didn't have the skills to make. So after the experience of doing that, I felt for the first time like I am a film director. Like I know how to make a movie now. I'm not pretending. I'm not convincing people. Like I actually know how to do it. So going into this feeling that way was the only way to make it work if it works. And also, you know, I use the same collaborators, the same heads of department over and over again, and you know, and we work more fluidly. We are greater extensions of each other. You know, and that was very helpful too.
So when it came to writing the film that we've just watched, were you starting from scratch? Did you have something written already from when you had been thinking about making it?
I had the stage play, which didn't help a whole heck of a lot, but I had it, and what I did, the stage play was very expressionist. We like Caligariized Nosferatu for that, and I stand by my thoughts that Nosferatu is not particularly expressionist as a film, even though it came out, you know, during this expressionist movement. That Gallien's screenplay is written in an expressionist style, and some of the acting is in that style as well. But it's very clear that Murnau and Albin Grau, the designer and producer, were making a film that was steeped in German Romanticism from the middle of the 19th century. I mean, it's set in the 1830s for a reason. They are referencing paintings by Johann Christian Dahl and other Biedermeier painters. So my first thought was to kind of think about what were the filmmakers' intentions and amplify my knowledge about that stuff. Also, Albin Grau was a practicing occultist, and so I wanted to understand like his occult theory. I think that what was the biggest linchpin and thing that changed everything was it was that one of the things that also is great about the original film is that Ellen, the female protagonist, emerges as the central protagonist by the end of the film. But what if it was her story the whole time? And Ellen in the film is described as a somnambulist in the Murnau film. And you know, someone who sleepwalks is someone who sleepwalks. Doesn't mean a lot to us, but in this period, you know, a somnambulist was someone who was also like tied into the astral realm, the other realm, the shadow side, could go there. So having this woman who is an outsider, who doesn't fit into 19th century society, who is, as the press notes say, as much a victim of 19th century society as she is the vampire itself. That was a really interesting character to me because she understands something that she doesn't have the words to articulate, and she's fighting with herself, and she's very alone, and she has the husband who she loves, and he loves her, but he can't understand this side, and the only person who can understand this repressed side that other people are calling hysteria and melancholy is a fucking demon, is a vampire, you know, and it's this horrible, toxic, demented relationship, and that was really exciting to explore this love triangle. And I went back to Wuthering Heights, the novel, where Heathcliff, you know, it's not even about love, it's about possession and destruction of Kathy, you know, and that kind of obsession was very interesting to me. And then the other thing that was took the greatest amount of time, I mean, studying 19th century Germany, sure, and the mores and all that stuff, yes, but more challenging was to understand the folk vampire, especially because like you have to like peel apart all the things we've learned from cinema and all the things we've learned from Stoker and Polidori and go back to something else. You know, all of a sudden you're reading these early accounts of vampirism, and they often don't even drink blood. You know, sometimes these vampires are coming back to their widows and fornicating with them like again and again until they kill their widows. and you learn that if they are drinking blood, it's seldom from the throat. It's usually from the chest because of like old hag and waking nightmares and the pressure you feel on your chest. That was really interesting. So incorporating the folklore into the film was like another like major part of the research and writing process. And the script, I basically ended up writing a novella in order to like make this my own, so I could dig into Ellen's backstory, the Orlok's backstory, create this like Harding family, and there's lots of scenes that I knew would never be in the film, but it was important for me to like flesh them out, to like have some kind of command of the world and take ownership of, a story that is, someone else's and also so known.
You've covered so much in that answer. I really love that kind of reorienting and the way in which Ellen becomes it's so much her story, and the meticulous research is there in the sense that we feel like we are absolutely in a completely believable world where there is also a something that is not of that world. But just on a kind of specific point related to that, I found all of the commentary in the dialogue around hysteria and that idea of the kind of excess of blood, but the fear of contagion that was so much part of early work around hysteria that then led into early psychoanalytic work, and the way in which perhaps there was a time when we weren't so boundaried between what was kind of folkloric, what was scientific, what was superstition.
Yeah, I mean, it is like von Franz in the Murnau film, the Van Helsing character is a guy named Bulwer who doesn't really do much, and also Bulwer doesn't sound great in English, so I named him von Franz after the Jungian Marie Louise von Franz. But basically, he has his foot in both worlds. I know he sort of derides Enlightenment a bit, but he is like up to date with the science of 1838, but also knows that like Paracelsus had some good ideas, and you can't forget these two things. But it is true that even the up-to-date science, like when you read the book, you're like, this is pretty wacky stuff, Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your different work on the film and what parts of yourself you're bringing to that? So when you're writing, are you already writing with kind of particular kind of mise en scène in mind? Like, are you writing as a director?
Yeah, I think that I try always to sort of start, writing as a director with shots in mind, with music in mind, and so on. But I think sometimes when you're trying to make a scene work, I often just like get into the scene, and it becomes a stage play. And sometimes, even though it's like the last thing I want to be doing, I'm like picturing bad TV coverage as I'm just trying to like find it. I found that less and less. But certainly with this screenplay, which I started 10 years ago and was more or less hasn't changed a whole lot since then, that kind of happened here. So the final writing, obviously, as we all know, happens in the edit room. But there, there's a big phase of writing when I'm working with Jaron, my DP, on storyboarding the film. So this was shot in Prague. We moved to Prague even like a month and a half before pre-prep started because we wanted our kids to start school on time. But that was a perfect opportunity for Jaron and I to hang out in the kitchen of my flat and start storyboarding this thing. But very often, because we're trying to do all these long unbroken takes, there is a rewriting process where you kind of have to distill the beats and reshape the beats so that one thing can flow to another in order to achieve that kind of photography. So that I think I try to incorporate that into the scripts that I write now, but this script was not done that way. So it happened in my kitchen with Jaron.
And you're also a producer on the film, but I really wanted to ask you about working alongside Chris Columbus. and his kind of creative input into the film?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Columbus is incredible. I first met Chris on The Witch because we were finishing the movie with Monopoly money, and he and his daughter Eleanor have a company, Maiden Voyage, and their initial intention was to help first and second time filmmakers, and so that's what he did for me. But he's been a mentor, and I wanted him to produce this because I wanted this to reach a larger audience, and I wanted the security of Chris Columbus, dealing with the studio, which in the end, Focus was so. This is not just lip service. Focus was so supportive. I get on my knees and pray to the gods every day about how grateful I am about that. But Chris also, having someone who is a master at normal ass Hollywood storytelling was really helpful to have, because me and Jaren tend to have arty farty inclinations. So Chris was combing through our storyboards and saying where's this beat? Where's this beat that's in your script? I don't see it. It's not enough for them to say it. You have to see it. We have to see it visually, and that kind of, and he, he's at the monitor every day. He was amazing. And the film is infinitely better because of Chris's input, for sure.
You talked about being in your kitchen in Prague with Jaren. Can we talk a little about the visual language of the film and some of those conversations perhaps that the two of you were having about how the film should look?
I mean, it's an evolution of stuff that I've been doing, and we've been doing. I think, there's a lot of, the Northman has a lot of wonders too. I think that they're more self-conscious, and I think they draw more attention to themselves, and I think they sometimes take the viewer out of the film. I personally experience, I'm not, I made it, so I can't be subjective, but I experience this as being a little more subtle. I think part of that is that as we're introduced to this stuff, it's in chamber scenes, and it's not like a battle scene or something epical. So you get into the mode of these kinds of shots a little more gently. We start in Ellen's bedroom. You're arrested by the fact that she's floating. You're not thinking about the camera work. There's subtitles and a vampire shadow, and you aren't paying attention to the camera work. Hopefully, you're just like trying to figure out what's going on in the story. And then by that point, it's just happening. The Innocence by Jack Clayton, shot by Freddie Francis, was probably maybe the largest cinematic influence on this film aside from Nosferatu, we didn't want to replicate any shots from More Now. There are some that are similar for sure, but we didn't replicate any shots. But I love Freddie Francis. His work with Jack Clayton is the best, because I think they really pushed each other to be the best. But even his directing of Hammer and Amicus movies, his staging's great. And a lot of times it's the same thing with the B Sherlock Holmes movies, made by Universal. Sometimes these long shots are just because they didn't have time in the day to do 10 setups. So if you do one, then you can get it all done and go home and have tea. So there's an economy in it, but also Freddie Francis is a great storyteller, so it also works. So we studied that. We looked at all kinds of movies, but but that was for the visual language, kind of the main touchstone.
That, I hadn't really thought about The Innocence, but when you say that, of course, it has absolutely that sense of the uncanny that we have in Nosferatu, so that makes sense. There were a couple of specific things that I wanted to ask about in terms of the look of the film, the sort of desaturated kind of nature of it, but also things like the use of candles and the use of candlelight. How tricky was that?
We usually desaturate our movies 10 to 15%, and this one was closer to 20, which I often can find to be a little bit annoying as a viewer. But I think with the gothic atmosphere and on the fog machine going all the time, and the desaturated costumes and everyone's pale, I think it's okay. and then I mean we wanted to differentiate Transylvania with Visburg. You know, there is some candlelight in Visburg, but mainly they're using lamplight, which we use movie lights for. We saw the real period lamps and saw how they glow and the color temperature, and we kind of matched it, whatever. And then, I mean, it's, you know, for Barry Lyndon, it was very complicated to light with flame, but it's not complicated to light with flame today, even though we were shooting on film. The fast film stock and fast lenses make it possible. But the scene where the old Romanian woman leads Nicholas Hoult into his room, and there is like a large portion that is illuminated by one triple wicked, but one candle, was very hard for the focus puller, for sure. Yeah. But it just you know, it's a nice texture to just use the flame and to have flame bars and to have mirrors reflecting the flame. To, you know, it's satisfying, you know.
And I'm assuming that you were shooting that on one of the many kind of set builds that you had.
Yeah, I mean, I think most audiences won't know you would, but yeah, like we built virtually everything here. You know, I mean, though Craig's finishes are quite fantastic. You know, I think, you know, the castle interior, particularly the Great Hall, like when you're standing in there, it did not look like a set, you know, and the monastery interior did not look like a set. But you know, obviously with your keen eye, I'm sure you can tell that Visburg is a backlot, but it was amazing to build. And I mean, just to have the opportunity, and this is partially, you know, this is for, it's for articulating the historically accurate architectural detail I'm looking for, but also and just general control, as particularly with these long shots. Very often, Craig has to, you know, hide seams and hinges into his like finishes so that we can move walls and windows and doors like during a take, you know, in order to achieve these shots. And there's a hell of a lot of time, like with having little transparent sheets of paper with like what the lens sees over the Craig's drawings of the set, and then we do it in person. And oftentimes, when everything's taped out, we're like moving a doorway a little over here, a little over there, and then just it's kind of tedious, but we find that it's worth it.
Yeah, and I've heard the actors talk about how helpful and important it was for them, the kind of meticulous detail that went into the finishing of those sets.
So yeah. So my like sort of obsession is to make things historically accurate, which one totally does not make a movie good by any means at all. And a lot of my favorite films of fair production design have nothing to do with that at all. But it is my particular approach that I enjoy. I enjoy the research. It just excites me. It gets me fired up. It gets me passionate. But the other things that it does is it like easily unifies all my heads of department. We all know what we're looking for, you know? And so sometimes it becomes a hunt, a mystery to discover, like, oh, what was this embroidery like in Hunedoara, Transylvania on this, you know, and that's exciting, but also, and then when you found it, it's like really great. But I think, you know, when it's not a hunt, and it usually isn't, and certainly for like, you know, upper and middle class and even to some degree the lower class people in a northern Baltic German city, it's fairly easy to find that stuff. So what's great about it is that to make an atmospheric movie, it's an accumulation of details. And when you're doing it this way, you can like accumulate a lot of details very quickly because you're replicating stuff instead of creating stuff out of your imagination. So I find that is a little bit of like of a shortcut. But I also think that but this same kind of thinking does go into the script writing and also like writing a story without a message, a story that is just comes from the mindset of the people in this period. Again, it's impossible to be historically accurate. Like, it's impossible. It's always going to be an interpretation, but it is something that we're looking for. And but the final thing And I would do this with any movie anyway, but since I'm dealing with genre and I'm dealing with like the fantastical, I hope that in creating a world where the material world and in the interior world of the characters is so grounded in the history, and everything is there for a purpose and has been thought out, that it helps you believe in the metaphysical things like a vampire a little more easily. Yeah. I hope.
For sure. One of the things that I was really struck by, and it's a kind of detail, I guess, is how busy, like when we first see Visburg, and I really noticed this as being a real difference from the Murnau film, where it feels like no one else lives there. We come out into Visburg and it's absolutely teeming. It's so busy. There are so many people kind of going about their business. And I felt like then when we come to the invasion of the rats, there was a really nice parallel between those two.
Yes, well, I was very fortunate to be able to afford more extras than Murnau. I'm sure he would have done it the same if he could have,
Yeah. I think that leads us maybe to just talk a little bit about the visual effects, which obviously are also kind of integral to our sense of both believing kind of all elements of the film, but also the way it looks. And I think that Angela Barson, who you worked with again on this film, she said something really interesting last week when she said that it's a combination of practical and digital effects, but when she works with you, it's sometimes the kind of opposite to what people would imagine. So things that people might think are digital are actually kind of practical effects and vice versa. I wonder if that's how you see it, but also if there are examples of that.
I mean, it's partially so that you don't see the digital effects as much, because you're expecting the rats are going to be CG, you're expecting the wolves are going to be CG, and when there are CG rats in the movie, but we had thousands of real rats and so the rats in the foreground are always real. The rats on Emma Corrin were very real and very pooping and peeing on them all the time. And that really helps. And I like visual effects to kind of finish things off and complete things and comp things together rather than create. But we definitely created some stuff, and one shot I will happily give them credit for, because no one would ever in a million years, but where we weren't allowed to we weren't allowed to go to Bukovina to shoot those Romanian monasteries. So we built the interior, and the exterior we took 1 million photographs and scans and stuff, and they built that with CG. I mean, it is astonishing, and not the kind of approach that I would like to do. But when we did have to build something like that, again, we would go and do we built 6 city blocks of Visburg. We didn't build everything, and so they went to northern Germany, to Lübeck and to Wismar and to Bremen and wherever else, and they scanned the buildings that were there to get the textures and blah blah blah. So anything that is sort of full CG or whatever has comes from something real to some degree. And and also Orlok, sometimes there's seams on his fingers needed to be fixed because they were coming off, but that was Bill, that was David White and Bill's work.
Yeah. So that kind of very neatly brings us on to what I wanted to ask you about next, which the film obviously has a really great ensemble cast around the kind of key characters. And we've already talked about the kind of centering of Ellen's story. Could you talk a little about working with Lily Rose Depp in prepping for the role of Ellen, not least because it's a very physical role, and we absolutely have to kind of see her interiority, but she also has these incredible scenes where she is possessed.
Yeah, so obviously Lily's totally incredible. She really impressed me when I had my first meeting with her, and she had seen every seminal Dracula film and plenty of non-seminal ones too. And she really understood the script, and she, like immediately starts referencing Żuławski without me needing to bring it up. And I said, look, I'd like you to play the role. You still have to audition, but let's see how we can make sure that you nail the audition. I did that same thing with Bill, actually. And she was incredible, and it was raw and it was brave, just like what she does here. And Lily worked for months on the dialect. She didn't want to mess up this British accent. And then we worked with Marie Gabrielle Roti, a choreographer who she also helped stage. She was there usually on the big crowd scenes, also to help sort of just like organize the flow of things. But she's an expert on this Japanese dance discipline Buto, and she worked with Lily on the body work. And so all that stuff that Lily does is her. There's no CG enhancement. That is all her. And it is, you see this woman fighting with herself and fighting with this demon through her body. It is really incredible. So she was always working with Marie Gabrielle, but just generally talking about acting approach with the film, I have 2 weeks of rehearsal, and it is mainly like the actors learning the blocking for the shots that have already been pre-planned by Jaren and I. So they're folding into something that's already been designed. Some of the really long dialogue scenes, I will block with the actors for the first time in this 2-week rehearsal time, and Jaren's there with his camera and trying, and he'll be like, maybe they should just move a little, great idea, and we finish the last bit of some of those oneers in that process, and then there's lots of rehearsals on the weekends, and when Jaren's doing his shockingly long lighting setups, I'm often like drilling blocking with the actors in a green room somewhere as well, so that because like if you're going to do this kind of specific blocking, in order for it to not feel dead, and maybe it does, I don't know, like the more that it's integrated into your muscle memory, the more that it can have life, and it feels a little less like actors hitting their marks. The only thing that's deliberately stylized is the fairy tale sort of composition sometimes, when we see the castle, but the acting is meant to be naturalistic, but if you have a vampire chasing you, like, you're not going to act chill, if you're an insane occultist, like, you're not going to act normal, I mean, Zizek doesn't act like a human, but someone did point out to me that, like, all the blocking's kind of like this, or this, or this, or this, and I said, okay, maybe that is a little stylized, but that was not intentional.
But thinking about the kind of naturalistic performances, I think some of the kind of scenes in the castle between Orlok and Thomas, I mean, I think Nicholas Hoult is really wonderful in those scenes, because it's kind of so touching, actually, his terror.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of said, like one of the things that was really actually also very helpful in the writing process was looking at Dracula Dead and Loving It, which kind of points out every issue with Dracula stories, and like everyone in the village is telling him, don't go to the castle, don't go to the castle, don't go to the castle. Well, if they're saying it in a language that he doesn't understand, then like it's just unsettling and he doesn't know what's going on. And obviously in this circumstance, because the Orlok is a folk vampire, he's more like a zombie. He's just a dead Transylvanian nobleman. He doesn't want Nicholas Hoult to see him, to know that he is a corpse. But also, Nicholas can see that this is a bad situation, and then I just, it is funny to watch him trying to be polite and have small talk and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and that, we because this is so much on stage, I also played music and sound design, which is something I've actually only done in one scene, because usually my movies are like shot on the side of a mountain, or like whatever, on a cliff or something. So you don't need to like spruce it up with music. But that was something that was kind of interesting. And we were definitely blasting lots of scary stuff when Nick was doing those scenes. And it is, one of the, like these oneers I find engaging as an audience member. Like those are kinds of movies I like to watch the most, because you're just kind of experiencing the moment. Obviously, they're shot reverse shot. Sometimes you just want those faces and you just want that energy of shot reverse shot or whatever. But when we're doing these long shots, another thing I like about them is the vibe on set. Because everybody feels involved, because Aaron is dependent on Willem, who's dependent on Ralph, who's dependent on the focus puller and the dolly pusher, and the carpenter has to swing the wall out of the way. And so there's just so much focus and engagement on set. It is like a little bit tiring, but it's cool. Like it's cool for everyone to feel like a collaborator.
And you're shooting on 35 mils, so people really want to get it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about creating Orlok.
Sure.
In all his kind of terrifyingness. Again, I think this is where some of the things that you're saying about the folk vampire and that idea of sort of authenticity authenticity applied to the depiction of a vampire might sound like a slightly odd kind of idea,
and
but actually it's kind of integral to how he looks and sounds.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, okay, like, so what does a dead Transylvanian nobleman look like? Like, wow, like they're wearing coats with sleeves that are like super fucking long, like just to show off that they have the money to spend on fabric. And on my arms are never going in there, but they look great. And he's got this hat, and he's got this facial hair, and he's and all this, and that was exciting, because I think it's like there are things about the costume that remind you of Eastern European things that you are kind of aware of, so it kind of it feels grounded, but there are some unexpected things. But we also did, in the makeup design, want to still reference Shrek. I didn't want to do Shrek again. I felt it was really important to not do that. But obviously the fingernails and the shape of the skull, and we gave him like a hunched back that was built up, that was also based on Shrek. But yeah, and one thing that David White did that was super cool was he had his ears rotten into the shape of a point, so that he is a human, but he still has Max Schreck's pointy ears, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I found that so respectful, I guess, not in a kind of corny way, but because I feel like even if people haven't seen Murnau's Nosferatu, a lot of people have seen images of Max Schreck, and they recognise the fingers and they recognise the ears.
and you want that there, and I'm sure that there'll be some people complaining about the mustache forever, but try to find a Transylvanian nobleman without one. And if you don't feel like Googling, you just remember Vlad the Impaler. So.
Let's talk a little bit more about the shoot itself.
Sure.
So you shot in Prague, you shot some location, but mostly on set. How long was the shoot?
It was 65 days. It was supposed to be a little shorter, but things happen, weather and other things. We primarily shot. We shot everything in the Czech Republic. We built a Transylvanian village somewhere, but we did. We used Hunedoara Castle, which is a castle in Transylvania, as the exterior of Castle Orlok. I think it was the castle that inspired Stoker to be I think it was his inspiration as Castle Dracula, because we know very clearly that he used this book by Emily Gerard as one of his sources, and there's an engraving of the castle when it was in disrepair in there, and it kind of matches his description of Castle Dracula. So super cool that we use that and whatever. It's also been on plenty of movies, including like some like Dragon Slayer 14, but like whatever. And then we the castle courtyard and the gatehouse is Pernstein Castle in Moravia in the Czech Republic, and we brought in larger gates and did some modifications to the courtyard. But basically, I had studied like all these movies I had shot in the Czech Republic, and so when we were scouting, I'd be like, okay, this place was in Underworld 2, this was in like Gilliam's Brothers Grimm, this was in From Hell, like whatever. And we go to Pernstein Castle, and I cannot figure out why I know it. But it's great. And it seems like it's like the one. And then in the car ride home, I'm like, fuck, you know what? It was in Herzog's Nosferatu. Because I was trying not to watch it. I mean, I watched Herzog's Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula a zillion times when I was younger. I'm sure that's all very apparent. But in the 10 years of trying to make this, I didn't revisit them on purpose. And but then I scrubbed through the movie and realized that the places that we wanted to shoot were not places that Herzog shot. So we get to kind of acknowledge Herzog, but also like not see the same stuff, which was pretty exciting. The cemetery was a cemetery walking distance from my house, but we had to like bring in the mausoleum and bring in 30 headstones. Like, but yeah, we tended to build stuff.
You talked a few moments ago about that idea of everyone really kind of collaborating. What's your, when you're on set, what kind of atmosphere are you trying to create?
I mean, it can't be humorless, but as I mentioned before, my sets are fairly serious, and if you I think, there's been a lot of journalists on this press tour have wanted to be like, was it really cold and was the ship really wet? It's like, yeah, sure, but like not compared to the Lighthouse, not compared to the Northman, not compared to the Witch. Like this was on stage, And what was intense about this movie was the emotional scene work, and so that is a different kind of focus and intensity. But also with that stuff, you need to know when to let the air out and to lighten the mood a little bit and crack a joke. But I think, I want it to be focused and focused.
Yeah. I want to ask you again. We've talked a little bit about this before, but I'm interested in how the other cast members reacted to kind of Bill in full Orlok makeup, and also what your kind of instruction was around that.
I asked Bill. Bill was, when he played Pennywise, he was like sequestered from everyone, and I know that he felt shitty because he felt really lonely and didn't enjoy the experience. He enjoyed the experience overall, but not that part of it. So, I said I wouldn't do that to him, and I also don't want him to be method because the amount of energy that it would take to be a supernatural being who's incapable of mistakes, that's too much to ask. But you're the contemporary of the other actors. You're playing a dead 50-year-old, but you're not 50 years old. So when you're in makeup, just kind of don't talk to the actors, just stay away. And he did, but he also again knew that sometimes it was the right time to crack a joke, So I think he was intimidating, and I think Lily Rose was legitimately kind of scared by him, and aside from and Bill, I'm into some weird shit. But when he was telling me about his interior world of this character, it was kind of frightening, which is great.
I'm going to open it up in a second, but whilst we're on Bill, just talk a little about because what's terrifying is not just how he looks, but also how he sounds.
Yeah, he worked with my friend Ausa Junius-Dotter, who's an opera singer, and she worked on dropping his voice an octave for the role, and and he worked on this pained breath and all this kind of stuff, and in that yet again, that is him. Obviously, you guys know, we're pushing it into the subs and whatever, but that's his voice, that's his voice.
We're going to open up and come to you, and I think there are people with mics, yeah?
Hi, thank you very much. As a Romanian, I can vouch for the mustached medieval dudes. And on that point, I really appreciated the fact that his costume was 400 years predating where we were in the story. So that kind of was a great Easter egg for me. And another Easter egg that I absolutely loved was liliac, and the fact that in Romanian it means both bat and the flowers on the bed at the end. So 10 points on that. I wanted off the back of that, I wanted to ask you at what point you decided to invent a language for him, because I think it feeds a lot on Romanian and like other both Slavic and Romance languages, and how you arrive at that hybrid, because it sounds very convincing.
So like Liliac was all me, but I worked with Florin Lazarescu, who is like, he's a novelist and a poet, and like he's most known in the West for writing the screenplay Afarim, which is a very cool film. But he was our Romania, Transylvania consultant, and so he tried his hand at ancient Dacian, which is the language that the like ancestors of the ethnic Romanians would have spoken. So that is like his interpretation of ancient Dacian. The old woman, she was from southern Romania, and so she was doing an accent, and we found her on TikTok. Because I was like no, like less teeth. I need less teeth. And basically, one of the casting directors found her, and her niece videos her cooking traditional Romanian food, and she goes by Bunica, which means granny, and she basically wears the modern version of what she's wearing like every day, like with the kerchief and the whole thing. It's amazing.
Fantastic.
Hi. Obviously, you incorporated a lot of elements from the original film Nosferatu, but also Bram Stoker's Dracula. I wanted to know, when did you feel it was right to kind of dip into Stoker, and when you felt it wasn't right? For example, we don't have the so-called Brides of Dracula in this version.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think that that it's just a matter of like trusting yourself. I don't know. I think I wanted to follow the main movements of Nosferatu, and I think that there are some little details from Stoker here and there, but the only like major deviation that is like that is Stokerish is in beefing up the Van Helsing character, but we also make him different, from Van Helsing, and he's kind of his own thing to some degree. So and he's a mouthpiece for not only like the occult systems of his period and the science of his period and Paracelsus, which in the Murnau film, like Bulwer is described as like a follower of Paracelsus. So I was like, approaching him from that. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. But I think you get the idea.
Hi, I loved the film.
Thanks.
I just want to ask about colour, because you mentioned before about desaturation and how you went a bit further with it. I noticed specifically the scene with the billiard table that there's like everything was in brown, but even the table itself was in brown. And it looked like throughout the film there was basically two tones or two colours for everything except for like the blood. And it looked like, as I said, with the billiard table, that had been done in camera and purposefully rather than just taking colour away. And I just want to know what your approach was for your concept for colour.
I mean, we basically there wasn't at this point we don't tend to like have a ton of discussion, but I didn't want to have red aside from blood, and then we were also going to have red in the Transylvanian folk clothing, but that seemed like cool with me. The weird, like the billiard table for your information, like was like golden colored felt instead of green, because that was just like a cool period thing that we were like, oh, they did that. That's nice. Like, great. And it also gets, we don't have a big bright green billiard table in the shot, or a red one. But yeah, I think we it was mainly just about like keeping it calm, keeping it clamped down, like not having any colors that like really screamed at themselves, screamed out, like, look at me. I mean, Ellen's blue dress was something that we had to like tame a little more in post. It's because we have a little bit of like cyan blue, like always, and so that dress got a little too electric. But the lilac dress that she wears, in the sort of dinner scene early on, when we desaturated everything, it just appeared gray. So that was something we had to like hold on to keep that lilac there. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the film. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but you mentioned earlier about the amount of films you've had that kind of fell apart and then maybe came back and didn't. And obviously we're in a room full of filmmakers that probably have to deal with quite a lot of rejection and no's and things all the time. Like, how mentally do you find the resilience to kind of carry on, and how do you kind of cope when those disappointments happen?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. Like, I mean, I thought I was going to have a fucking breakdown when this fell apart the second time, because it was one of the closer ones where like the DP and the costume designer and the production designer had all moved to Prague, and Jaron, my DP, he ended up living in Prague for a year because he already put his kid in school, But it is just part of it's part of the business, and I've always got like a million projects like on the stove because I don't know like what's going to happen. But yeah, when you're close, it is much more painful than when you're not. And with the first, and when Nosferatu fell apart the first time, I was like, okay, like, doesn't need to happen. It's fine. Great. Like, I should be making original movies anyways. This is stupid. Fuck this, And then when we were in COVID, one day I like opened it up and was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I should spruce the script up a little bit, and you can fall back in love with your exes, but I definitely have to usually I have to kind of reject and hate it a little bit to move on and start writing something else, even if I know that's not going to get made, just to like fall in love again and get the inspiration again. But it sucks, and by the way, like the movie I tried to make like this year, like didn't get greenlit, There you go. Just say it happens. It happens to everybody.
Thank you. So my question is kind of twofold, because the actors looked absolutely exhausted and dehydrated from the intense performances you had to give. And I know that every production tends to come with that one top level scene that keeps directors awake at night thinking, here it comes, how am I going to manage that? So I'm kind of wondering how you managed to maintain the stamina and the energy of the actors, but also, what's that one scene that kind of kept you awake at night during production? It could have been like logistically, emotionally, or just knowing, like, can I pull this off without knowing, sometimes you don't know if it's going to work until you're on the other side of a scene sometimes. I was kind of wondering if there's anything that jumps out at you in terms of what gets you kind of, awake at night.
Oh, I mean, a lot of scenes kept me awake at night, like Orlok's death kept me awake at night. I hadn't figured it out for a long time. It's also like against my taste and sensibilities to like shine a bright fucking light on the monster who's like wearing a bunch of fake stuff, and I still don't know if it totally works, because it's just like, I don't know. And also Ellen's big scene with Thomas where she sticks her tongue out, was something that I was very anxious about, because also I knew that like the possession scene in bed was going to be like a run-of-the-mill Exorcist thing, but like, I know that would work because we've seen shit like that before, but I wanted something that we hadn't quite seen that would be somehow scarier than that. I don't know if I succeeded, but that was something that was like a lot of pressure I placed on myself. I think I'm really lucky that all the actors just really wanted to be a part of this, you know, and there was like certain opportunities for all of the actors involved, aside from Willem and Simon McBurney, but luckily Willem likes to work with me and Simon's nuts. So, but for the young actors, there was just like so much hunger that I'm just so grateful to their dedication to it, because they supported each other, and there was just like everyone wanted to be there. So even at one point Lily got like sick, as one does, and so then doing that kind of work was even more difficult, But everyone's just trying to keep an eye out, trying to make sure people get as much rest as they can, blah blah blah, the usual stuff. But I think it was the actors' passion for what they were doing. Like, sorry to be Pollyanna, but was kind of what kept them going.
Thanks. I had a question about the music. It was really atmospheric and great, and just wondered how you kind of approached that with your composer, and also maybe what influences or even temp tracks you might have been looking at, before going into the score. And just a second question, which you don't have to answer, but I'm always interested with the writer-director how you manage family. You talked about family, how you manage family life and balance that on a huge feature film.
I mean, that is a good question, and that's another reason why I like Chris Columbus, is because he really is a family man and has found a way to balance it, and it is not easy. I mean, I guess the great thing is that like when I'm writing, like I'm at home, and my son's like, "Why the fuck are you here all the time, Dad? Like, please." But then, and when I'm editing, it's more or less, 9 to 6, 9 to whatever, but it's fairly regular. But yeah, when you're on set, it's a beast, and there's nothing that can be done about that. And and I just try to do the best that I can, and remind my family, like, but when I'm writing, I'm around all the time. Yeah, and then the music, yeah. I mean, Robin Carolyn is actually like, one of my, I mean, we're all friends. It's like this crazy crew. We're all like a dysfunctional family, but Robin and I live pretty near each other. We go to the pub like once a week, and we share like the same sensibilities, maybe even more than anyone else. Like I like that, the not having the overlapping Venn diagrams, because then you're pulling from things you would never think of, but our Venn diagrams are pretty close. But and the stuff that I was playing on set was playlists that Robin and I were sharing. So obviously it was, you have the kind of Penderecki, Xenakis, like Bruno Madeira, like horror movie stuff that you would expect, and that's clearly plays a role. But then there was a lot of romantic music. I know the score to Angels and Insects by the Philip Haas movie was very inspirational for both of us, and there was a few tracks that in certain scenes with Ellen I would play a lot on set, and but it was fun to both like embrace the like gothic romance of it, and to like do the scares. I mean, this is the first time that I'm really, aside from like maybe one in The Witch, like attempting to do jump scares. I felt an obligation to do that, because this is like I'm doing a version of the movie that kind of created horror movies, and I have to say I have so much respect for James Wan, because they are hard to do. They are hard to do.
Thank you very much. It was a great movie. Really enjoyed that, and it looked beautiful.
Thanks.
One question, obviously, when you're doing Nosferatu, I'd imagine you would have had this black and white or colour, and obviously ended up with something in the middle. So there's sort of two questions. Was that something that was pushed by the studio, and you obviously wanted to do it black and white? And then I think there was a theme throughout. What was colour and what was black and white? As in, he wasn't around when it was good, it was colour, and when it was evil, it was black and white?
So it's as simple as just the moonlight is basically black and white. because like, I mean, maybe it was a stupid choice because obviously when you're in moonlight as a human, because leaves are green, bark is brown, my trainers or whatever color they are, like you're imagining the colors that are there, but you're actually only seeing like something very close to black and white. So we did the moonlight, this like very desaturated silvery color. That's a choice we made. But no, I mean, I didn't want it. I wanted it to be in color to also to separate from the worn out film and to embrace the romanticism. And I also felt that we could, I think the scene in the cemetery, I don't think it would have looked quite as good in black and white. I think the sort of sense of the lack of color in color like makes it more depressing in that. It's not always the case, but I think for this movie, that's how I saw it for whatever reason. But yeah. I will say though that like in Orlok's castle with the firelight and it's so warm, like it just doesn't seem scary enough. Like that would look better in black and white, But
I was about to ask you, although it's probably too soon to say, whether now kind of you're done with Nosferatu, but hearing you talk about even one part of it that you think it should be different, I'm not sure whether you're done with Nosferatu or not.
I mean, you're never done. Well, you're done with the movie. I love the fact that there's a deadline because you could, it's just like you've done as much as you can do, and now it has to be out there and has to live. But I don't think you're going to see me like redoing Nosferatu with like new CG characters or anything like that. But I think I am proud of the movie, and this in the Lighthouse, I was able to do a pretty decent job with my collaborators about getting our collective vision on the screen, which is a satisfying feeling. But it's good that you're not like that was fucking perfect because you need to like reach, and you need to get better, and you need to get excited about the next thing, So it's good that there's like plenty of things that I wish were better,
For sure. On that note, we have to end. Please join me in giving huge thanks to Robert Eggers.
Thank you.
This podcast was recorded at a Directors UK member event. You can hear plenty more directors in conversation by subscribing on the usual streaming platforms. Follow us on social media and find out more about us at directors.uk.com.